Good morning. I'm Julio Saenz along with Mauricio Riveros. Today we'll meet Tracy Boff, owner of Beyond the Box Solutions, and learn about how she helps organizations with strategic planning during these quick evolving times.
We hope you will be inspired.
Celebrating leaders in Rochester's unique and vibrant business community. We'll meet entrepreneurs whose passion and perseverance have helped push through life's challenges. Join us as we share their stories and journeys to success. It's time to be inspired.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you very much in Be Inspired, a show that we developed to interview interesting people who are starting business, people who are in business many years. The idea is to inspire our community, that you can do it. And you are an example of those type of people who are taking initiative in expanding the business. So let's start talking about who is Tracy.
Hi, and thank you for having me. So currently I own Beyond the Box Solutions. It's a consulting firm, and I'll talk about that. But I actually started, I have a strong, long not-for-profit background, worked at some local not-for-profits, in a variety of roles, starting even with direct care roles, working my way through different levels of leadership, including executive leadership. Also worked for the state for a while in Department of Health, and came back to Rochester. And after working through a company, actually starting one company that served people with disabilities across upstate New York of 41 counties, as a matter of fact, decided to branch off on my own, and needed a little bit more flexibility with my family and the role that I have as a parent and mother. So decided to start Beyond the Box Solutions. I have a consulting firm, and I work with some subcontractors. We do a variety of projects, anything from learning development, strategy design. I'm working with organizations on quality improvement projects. But two of the things that have really taken on a life of its own really are virtual event planning and support. Obviously with COVID, that really became a more critical venture for firms and for companies, and they needed to launch. Who knew we could do full-on conferences virtually across several states and do that successfully. And then also a work that I was involved in previously, but really through some business partnerships have further developed, and that's work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as we saw in 2020, the emerging needs that with companies needing to launch and dive further into that, that's part of the business has certainly grown.
Wow, it's really impressive to see the diversity of avenues and support and services that your organization offer to the people. So tell me a little bit about the name, because it's really intriguing and you find a very cool name. So tell us a little bit, what was the idea and how that idea came to put that very creative name company?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. So I actually developed a workshop several years ago called Beyond the Box Leadership, and it was really, really well received. As you work through, especially learning and development and working with different leaders, my own leadership philosophy was we are really beyond the box, taking that old cliche of thinking outside the box. I've seen organizations and worked in organizations and was fortunate to have support in the organizations I worked with, leaders that allowed me to think beyond that box. And really, I think in some of the things in some businesses and industries, it's literally beyond that thinking outside the box. We've squashed the box, we've stomped the box, we've had to throw the box out the window. So it's thinking of the things that are yet to come that we haven't even thought of yet. And I love working with leaders and organizations that are really allowing their employees to think of what's going to be common in 5 years we haven't thought of yet, and what's going to be common in 10 years we haven't thought of yet. So those cutting edge ideas are what is beyond the box.
I think we're both super impressed with the way you've been able to launch this company in the middle of COVID. So what do you think prepared you to be able to develop and innovate so quickly? What experiences do you think in your life have at this point? Because you rolled out a lot of amazing things and products for your customers, and all within the blink of an eye.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So as structured as I am in my business life, I also have learned through the years, when an opportunity knocks, you have to at least open the door and explore it. And for the good example was that virtual events. I have planned many in-person events and have been involved in that. Never was I truly deeply involved in virtual event planning. So when I launched into my business and was talking about event planning as part of that, what came to mind immediately was the virtual. I actually had a business partner who had an in-person event that she had to cancel. And she said, Tracy, we have to take this virtually. And we just literally, took the principles we knew from a in-person, what we liked in events and keeping it engaging, learning some best practices on what keeps people engaged over Zoom is much different. Kept programming quick, obviously had to have the technology and platform. I'm only as smart as what the people that work around me are. So certainly brought in some people that I knew knew technology platforms well and could execute that. And we've, me and my business partner and a couple other business partners have launched several successful large scale virtual conferences.
Well, that's really, really cool and really impressive, because this is the challenge. Reality has moved us very quick to different environment. This interview needs to be in Zoom, right? We are still having this challenge of the social distancing and the risk of what this pandemic does. I don't think we are completely out. And the question that I have for you has been always for me, because I love to have the physical, in-person type of conversation, especially in events. It's an opportunity to have, if you are doing a fundraising, how you motivate people who are out in the screens and they are not really there. It's easier when people are there. What would be the 3 or 4 key recommendations for people who are organizing these type of events? What are the critical things to make a virtual event successful?
Well, besides calling Beyond the Box Solutions for support, my recommendation would be you have to keep it short and simple. Less is more, especially in a virtual environment. Keep organize your speakers, or even if they're internal, you have to keep them on cue. Give them questions in advance so that they're prepared, so that flow goes well. Third would be the technology. You have to have even dress rehearsal run-throughs. Know your platform. Make sure your speakers know the platform. By now, everybody thinks that, assumes that people know Zoom, but make sure people really, really do. And we always have like pre-planning calls with anybody who's going to be on screen. And fourth, I think outline your realistic expectations. And outline the expectations for the participants so that they're not expecting this much when they're going to get this much, and honestly keep it simple.
Very good. That's very good advice. I've been on some really good ones, and I've been on some not so good ones since this all started. So thank you. Now, did you have at what point did you decide that you wanted to be inspired and start your own business? Did you have someone in your family or a business mentor or anything like that? How did that all come about?
Yeah, so in my last role, I was, certainly working a tremendous amount of hours. We get to a level of burnout, and I was certainly looking to make a career move. I've thought about going out on my own before, but at one point, and at this point in my career, I really thought I'm only going to be engaged. I need to be doing something I really, truly find meaningful and want to do. And not that there's not employers that are doing a tremendous amount of meaningful work, but I really felt like I contribute in a variety of different ways and maybe not be locked into a certain role. Um, and to be honest with you, it was just like it was either going to be now or never. And as much as I talk all the time in my workshops or when I talk with doing leadership coaching about that beyond the box, I said it's time for me to just move that theory forward and see where this goes. I made the decision right before COVID really, everything started to shut down. And then as things started to shut down, I was like, oh, wow, that might not have been the best decision. Yet, like I said, the virtual event planning took off, not for unfortunate reasons. The DEI piece of in partnership of my business took off. But again, you just, I wish that wouldn't be the case. But when it is, at least you want to uh, be able to respond to companies in a valuable way, having that experience and also bringing partners in that obviously they have different lived experience than I do. And that's how we offered some value with that. So it really was about just, it's time and I need to jump in both feet.
I love that. And speaking of change, you mentioned that you also do, your business also does work with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can you tell us a little bit about why that's important? And maybe, it's not just a feel-good thing, but it's also affects us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, even in my career, I had executive leadership positions. I worked in not-for-profit, and certainly I was supportive of all the staff that worked in the organizations I worked for, and certainly the people that we served. But I think being humble enough to really reflect back on the events of 2020 allowed many of us who I don't have a lived experience as a person of color. So really taking that time to be able to stop and listen and hear what people were saying also gave me a new direction that I also had more work to do. And when I work with organizations and a business partner that I have who I'm very close to that I consider a mentor, who is a person of color, she has such different lived experience than I do. But I find that many leadership people who are white or identify as Caucasian, I also can bring messages to them that I was that CEO. I was that CEO that certainly said, of course, we have diverse hiring practices. And at the time, I thought we did. And certainly, we didn't stop anybody from applying. But at the same time, it wasn't maybe intentional action about diverse hiring practices. Those are two different things. And I think messages coming from me sometimes in certain circumstances, especially being that CEO that I sat there with the same mentality, is let's step back and what intentional action are you taking here? It's not just following the laws around anti-discrimination is not necessarily the same as supporting diverse hiring practices. And I'm just using that as an example. So really, that's where the strategy work under the DEI also comes in well, because organizations that have set strategies around diversity, equity, inclusion tend to be more successful in, again, maybe not changing the world, not changing everything in their organization, but changing a piece at a time, looking at those structures, looking at those policies, looking at the equities in their organization. I'm working with a few organizations now looking at surveys, and it's, the proof is in the pudding of certain people are identifying different inequities than other people. So it's my job to present that to the leadership and help them sort through how they're going to address that.
Well, thank you, Tracy. We'll be back with more after these messages.
And that is so essential. A nation that we have the richness of different backgrounds and different possibilities and different perspectives. And I think that is so important to do it when you are a CEO, business owner, be able to really use that capacity to work with people that are thinking differently, and that enrich the vision and the mission and the objectives of the organization and the goals that the organization can achieve. Now, Tracy, let's talk a little bit about technology. You know, it's something that is changing. It's very dynamic. Businesses are getting more in terms of the artificial intelligence. There are a lot of tools. There are a lot of dashboards. You can track strategic information, utilization of social media, a lot of platforms that right now is like an applications. So how you, from a strategic perspective, use the right things. You don't sometimes waste money, because can be also a waste and distraction when we go with a significant campaign and spend literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in something that maybe doesn't bring the return that we expect. So what's your strategy and how you focus and analyze and advise about technology and innovation?
Yeah, so I think it's important in the plan to build in metrics and early measures very early on, so you can see in the very beginning if you're if you're heading down the wrong road quickly. There's nothing more heartbreaking than launching into something and then really having to scale it back way deep into the project. So putting those measures in early, I think that's one way to help in that format. Also, I tell leaders all the time, please do not be afraid to bring all the experts within your organization or even out of the organizations to the table, because, if you're a marketing firm, well, and I'll use a good example in the DEI space. Typically, marketing firms are not very diverse in their staff. I'm not saying every marketing firm, the ones that I've seen and worked with, they are not going to be able to launch a marketing campaign with those employees internally necessarily that are going to maybe speak to certain populations. So you need to bring other experts to the table and not be afraid to do that. And then again, set those benchmarks and milestones early. As far as technology, we do virtual event planning, but certainly I don't consider myself a technological expert at any level. But it's more about just, not having the fear to embrace it. We want technology to launch us further, not hinder. But also, to me, it's still about relationships, still about people. We can have this platform, but it's getting to know you and me, and also that, companies that I work with have come back to me for other projects because they worked with me before. It's not just all based on, you can't put everything into the whole technological space. It's about getting to know people, getting to know their needs, and meeting people where they're at, having a conversation. And that can be much more meaningful than what you could bring to the solutions. A lot of people can research solutions, but it's a lot of information if it's not tailored to a conversation, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. One last quick question. You've come very far in a very short amount of time. Where do you see yourself where do you see the business in another 5 years?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I don't necessarily think bigger is better. So I don't have necessarily a goal to have. I'm not even sure. I work with some subcontractors. I'm not even sure if I'm going to launch into having direct employees. I'm kind of the opinion, again, that's something that you have to see the need and meet. Right now, we're able to meet the needs through partnerships and subcontract with other consulting firms. My goal at this point in my life is really to be working on meaningful projects with people that I value. There's some companies that I don't think, like in the DEI space, really have good intentions with that. And that's okay too. That might not be clients that I might choose to work with, but there's several that are. So it's really about taking beyond the box. And it's more important to me to be engaged in meaningful work and work of value. And certainly making a living at it, yes, that's important. But really driving meaningful work forward and helping clients make meaningful change in their organization is the most important to me.
Tracy, I will tell you that there is a lot of wisdom in your advice, and I think every company needs that type of advice, needs to have somebody that comes with fresh eyes from an external perspective, and I think that's the reason why your organization exists, serving in Rochester. Congratulations. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure that we will have you in the future, in future programs, because we know that your organization will grow and will grow in the right way. Thank you very much.
Coming up next week on Be Inspired, we'll meet Bill Ketchen, Vice President of the ACE Mentor Program that teaches high school students skills for the construction industry.
To watch today's episode and the complete interviews of our guests, go to rochesterfirst.com/beinspired. For more great talk with Rochester's entrepreneurs, listen to Bodette 97.1 Saturdays at 9 a.m. For Mauricio Riveros, I'm Julio Saenz. We'll see you next week on Be Inspired.